All right, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. Hello, I am Adele Mastardo, Director of Events for Opera Philadelphia. I hope everyone has weathered our recent snowstorm and is staying warm on this chilly day. Thank you so much for joining us for our Between the Notes lecture about the upcoming world premiere of Complications Ensue, which comes to the Academy of Music next week, February 4th through 8th. We would like to thank all of our members and subscribers participating in this event today for being such an important part of the family that makes Opera Philadelphia's work on stage and within the community possible. And we'd like to extend a special thanks to Sheila and Myron Bassman for their support of our Between the Notes series. A few other housekeeping notes. We are recording today's lecture so that we will be able to share it later with anyone that was not able to join us today. And as always, we will leave plenty of time at the end of our event for questions, but you may also ask a question at any point during the presentation by just entering it into the chat. I'm now pleased to introduce Dr. Lily Kass. Lily is an interdisciplinary scholar, educator, and artist. She currently teaches music history at Johns Hopkins Peabody Institute and Swarthmore College, and has taught many other places as well. She earned an AB in literature from Harvard and her PhD in musicology from the University of Pennsylvania. Lily has been a frequent guest speaker with Opera Philadelphia for many years and now serves as our scholar in residence. So without further ado, take it away, Lily.
Hello, everyone. Hi, Adele. Thanks for that introduction. I'm just going to take a minute to share my screen so you can see the visuals for this presentation, and then we will get started. Okay. There we go. Okay. I'm excited to be back for our first Between the Notes of 2026 and to talk about our world premiere of Complications Ensue. A question I get asked pretty often when I give talks about opera, and especially about contemporary opera, is why are there so few operatic comedies? I don't have to answer that question today because this opera is a comedy. It does address some more serious topics such as failed relationships, addiction to technology, the loneliness of aging. But overall, this opera is full of visual gags, surprising juxtapositions, and playful parodies. In today's talk, I will start with the unorthodox way in which Complications Ensue was conceived and created. Next, we will explore the opera's unique structure, and we'll then listen together to a few musical examples so that you can prepare your ears for the wide variety of musical styles contained in the piece. Finally, I will summarize some of the through lines I see in this opera that tie together this eclectic work as a cohesive whole. And again, please feel free as I go to write any questions or comments in the chat. I'll try to keep an eye on that as I go. Adele will help me as well. And then I will answer all non-urgent questions at the end of the talk today. Okay. So Complications Ensue started with a well-established artist who was brave enough to explore projects beyond his comfort zone. Michael R. Jackson, whose musical A Strange Loop won a Pulitzer Prize for Drama in 2020 and a 2022 Tony Award, wanted to try his hand at writing an opera libretto. He had written the words and music for A Strange Loop, but he wanted to dip his toe into opera by just focusing on the words and not the music. As he looked for connections in the opera world, Michael R. Jackson called Anthony Roth Costanzo, who at that time was not yet our general director, but was singing and producing his own projects. Anthony, in this phone call, affirmed Jackson's interest in opera and said he would connect him with colleagues if he ever heard of a project that was a good fit. Sometime later, one of Anthony's good friends, Justin Vivian Bond, also expressed a desire to participate in a staged opera as a performer. Bond had collaborated with Anthony on a cabaret show and recording, both called Only an Octave Apart in 2021 and 2022, respectively. Now they were looking to star as Sue in an opera called Complications in Sue. Complications in Sue. Anthony asked what the opera would be about, but Bond hadn't thought much further than the basic idea that the opera would track the life story of a complicated woman named Sue. When Anthony realized that as the new general director of Opera Philadelphia, he would be responsible for planning the company's 50th anniversary season, he wanted to commission a new work to mark the occasion. He thought back to Jackson wanting to write a libretto and Bond wanting to star in an opera. The pairing might work well, but who would write the music? Operas often take 4 years or more to be composed, workshopped, rewritten, and produced. And there wasn't that much lead time before the 2025-26 season where they wanted this opera to be performed. So Anthony proposed a workaround to Jackson. Would he be comfortable writing a libretto and giving it in pieces to a group of composers, each of whom would write one scene? Jackson was game. He wrote a libretto in 10 scenes, one scene for each decade of Sue's life. And Anthony commissioned 10 composers, some of whom had already had success in Philadelphia and whose work would be new to the city's audience. Some of whom had built their career in opera and some of whom had never explored the genre before. I'll introduce you to these composers more thoroughly later, but briefly, they are Andia Kehoe, Alistair Coleman, Natalie Joachim, Missy Mazzoli, Nico Muhly, Renee Orth, Cecile McLaurin-Salvant, Kamala Sankaram, Dan Schlossberg, and Erilyn Wallen. What's even more surprising than this decouple commission, and yes, I looked up the word for how to say double or triple, but for 10, just for this purpose, 10 different composers were commissioned, is the fact that these composers were kept in the dark about the full scope of the project. They were each told that the opera was about a woman named Sue going through her life, and that each scene represented a decade in Sue's life, but they were only given the text of the scene they had been chosen to write. And they didn't get to hear the music their colleagues were writing for the other scenes while it was in progress. So they basically had blinders on. They had their scene, the basic concept, and nothing else. And they had to write the music to their scene. This process harkened back to a technique of surrealist artists in the early 20th century who sought to create surprising pieces of art through unexpected juxtaposition. One of the ways they did this was through a game they called the Corps Exquise, or the Exquisite Corpse. So let's watch a little bit of a video from the Museum of Modern Art in New York City that explains and illustrates this creative game.
Surrealists believed in the power of juxtaposition, that two unlikely things would meet, and at that meeting point, there's this explosion.
Right? So, like, there's no motivation for her of like...
Wait. Exquisite Corpse was a drawing game played by a group of artists who belonged to the Surrealist movement. And they would take turns contributing one section to a composition that corresponded to a body. I might start with the head, and then I would fold down that piece of the paper with only a teeny bit showing past the fold as a sort of prompt for the next participant to continue their own contribution blind to what had come before. They would fold that down, the next participant would join in, et cetera, until the end when they would unfold the results and see something that arose by chance. Each of those creases is this magical moment. In 1924, André Breton.
So, has anyone seen these exquisite corpse works of art before? There are also some like parlor games that are still played. You can play this game with words, right? You write an opening sentence to a story, then fold over the paper, pass it to the person next to you. They write a sentence, and so on. And then you unfold the whole paper, and you have a story that ends up usually being quite silly because no one knows what the rest of the sentences are, right? I played that as a kid. We definitely didn't call it Exquisite Corpse. That's a pretty creepy name for a children's game, but the same sort of idea. And that was kind of the method for writing this opera, is each composer wrote something. It was tied together with the basis of the story, 10 decades in the life of Sue, but no one saw or heard what the other person was writing. So we got lots of juxtapositions, what they describe in that video as the folds we have in the scene changes of complications ensue. So to summarize everything we've learned about the conception of complications ensue so far, it's a work built around collaboration and a mixture of efficiency and excess, right? The composition needed to be written really quickly, and that's why it was written in this way. But there's also a lot going on in this production. There are more than 100 props used in this production, including a blow-up flamingo, a bundle of sage, a pistol, a sex toy, and a birthday cake. There are over 12 named characters, but only 4 singers playing them. 7 supernumeraries, which is what we call extras, like movie extras in opera, who help move things along and add interest to scenes. And all of them are coordinated by a 2-director team of Raja Feather Kelly and Zach Winokur. There are also 2 costume designers, one for the costumes of Justin Vivian Bond as Sue, and one for the whole rest of the cast. And of course, 10 composers, 1 librettist, and the one and only Opera Philadelphia. So how does this actually all come together in practice? The answer is really with a lot of hard work, which I saw in rehearsal the other day. But let's take a look at how the story unfolds. The audience gets to witness Sue first in scene 1 as a baby. Death pushes a blanket-wrapped bundle in a pram as she welcomes Sue to the world. You'll also have the pleasure of seeing 62-year-old Justin Vivian Bond embody a thumb-sucking, crying newborn baby in this scene. In scene 2, Sue is a child who loves Christmas so much that Mrs. Claus uses her as an example of the holiday magic that her terribly disillusioned husband Santa Claus should continue to believe in. Scene 3 introduces us to Sue as a mysterious transfer student in college, envied by all. Scene 4 offers us a window into Sue's interior life as a newscaster reports live from inside Sue's mind, commenting on how Sue seems to want to sabotage her blossoming relationship with her boyfriend, Roger. We see the results of this self-sabotage in scene 5 when Roger drunkenly calls 40-year-old Sue on a payphone, blaming her for the end of their relationship. Scene 6 is a kind of spoof on modern life with a personalized internet algorithm embodied in a trio of singers, trying to convince 50-year-old Sue to take part in the prevailing consumerist and technology-based culture. Sue lounges in her backyard in scene 7, half listening as her next-door neighbor bares his soul to her. We get to join Sue in reflecting on her life so far in scene 8, in which a memory of Sue as a child interacts with Sue at 70. The child is unsure whether she's happy with where she has ended up. In scene 9, we find Sue in a motorized wheelchair in a nursing home as her fellow octogenarians try quite literally to outrun death. And finally, in scene 10, Death, now embodied as a quartet of singers, helps Sue blow out the candles on her birthday cake, inviting her to dance and to die. So that's a lot. We'll talk about this plot more as we get into the music, but that's the general trajectory of the piece. We get little bits and pieces of information about Sue throughout the opera, kind of doled out to us. She's someone who death can't wait to meet again, a Christmas-loving child, a mysterious college student, a confused girlfriend who ends up separated from her partner. She, like many of us, is targeted by her internet algorithm and struggles to be in community with people beyond the comfort of scrolling on her phone. She continues to age, sometimes having trouble recognizing that she is still herself, until she dies at 99, having lived a full life. Throughout the opera, singers and supernumeraries all play a variety of characters, some of whom are listed here. You'll be wowed by how quickly the performers transform from one character to another, since there are very few pauses in the action of this opera. Justin Vivian Bond always embodies Sue, aging as the opera goes on. Bond dances along with the rest of the cast. Both of the directors were trained as dancers, and we can see they've choreographed a lot of the scenes, not just staged them, but choreographed them. Sue sings only once in scene 8 in a duet with her child self. Her primary form of communication are body language and also spoken language. So you'll hear a couple of short monologues in this production, and some of the text that Bond speaks in these monologues will be improvised in every performance. And there's some degree of drawing on audience energy and kind of interacting with the audience from the stage that comes from Justin Vivian Bond's experience as a cabaret performer. So now that we have some idea of how the opera is constructed, let's talk about how it sounds. Each of the 10 composers who wrote this piece has a different compositional voice, but as our production's brilliant conductor, Karen Levine, has noted, somehow they all managed to work together. When asked how the music flowed in a panel discussion at the Guggenheim last week, Levine said, "I think it's kismet, which I totally believe in. It was meant to be that these 10 composers, without even knowing that they kind of linked together without even knowing, which is, I find, quite amazing. It is exciting." In the following musical examples, I'll try to demonstrate the differences between the styles of these composers as well as their commonalities. The only musical examples we have to work with, because this is a world premiere, are from the January 16th iteration of the Guggenheim Works in Progress, which is where Karen said this, which included a panel discussion moderated by Anthony Roth Costanzo with the librettist Michael R. Jackson, the two directors Raja Feather Kelly and Zach Winokur, the conductor Karen Levine. The 4 singers in our production, soprano Kira Duffy, mezzo-soprano Rihanna Thelwell, tenor Nikki Spence, and bass baritone Nicholas Newton, sang excerpts from scenes 2, 3, 5, 6, 7, and 10 in this showcase in New York. And I will play you excerpts from these excerpts today and briefly fill in some of my own observations about the scenes for which we don't have musical examples, introducing you very briefly to the composers along the way. There are 10 of them, so we can't stay long on each scene. So this will be kind of a brief introduction to all of the scenes, so you have a little taste of what you will be listening to. Again, please feel free to put any questions or comments in the chat so that I can be sure to answer them. Okay. So our first composer is Erilyn Wallen. She composed the music to scene 1, in which Sue is a baby. Wallen was born in Belize, but moved to the UK when she was just 2. In July of 2024, she was named Master of the King's Music, meaning she is often called on to write pieces for commemorative or ceremonial occasions for the British royalty, and she may be asked to advise the king on music as needed, so quite a prestigious position. I've also seen it compared to positions like poet laureate or something like that. It's a kind of ceremonial position that also serves a purpose. Wallen first trained as a dancer before turning to musical composition, and her output has varied widely, from choral pieces for the BBC to more popular songs, from avant-garde instrumental pieces to vocal works highly influenced by Baroque compositions. In her assigned scene in Complications Ensue, She has made death into a figure who manages to be both alluring and menacing. So this is one scene for which we don't have an audio example, but I've copied a little bit of the score for you to see. Wallin has the mezzo-soprano navigate haunting chromatic passages that we see on the words, "We welcome you to the world." It's very kind of twisty, turny vocal line that sounds haunting in practice. And then we also have her break into jazzier dance rhythms as she embodies death. Here we see the performance instruction in the score is cheeky and slinky. And that's how the the performer is supposed to sing this part. The other singers join the mezzo-soprano to create a deathly quartet, one that will return in the final scene, which they, in fact, threaten to do in the libretto in this first scene. So they say, "We'll come back for you later. Welcome to the world. You'll see us again." So this kind of multiplicity of death, but led by the mezzo-soprano here. Scene 2 is by world-famous composer Missy Mazzoli, who we are proud to claim as a local here in Philadelphia. If you've been a long-time Opera Philadelphia ticket holder, you will recognize Mazzoli for her years as our composer in residence and remember the splash that the premiere of Breaking the Waves made at the Perlman Theater in 2016. Our season opener last year, The Listeners, was our second co-commission for Mazzoli. Mazzoli is an expert at building dramatic tension in music while still writing sweeping lyrical lines for her singers. In Complications Ensue, she was given the opportunity to write a comic scene for a grumpy old Santa Claus and his wife who tries to calm him down. So we do have a musical example here. And this is a little bit of the text, so you can kind of train your ears to the text as you listen, and also very relevant for this week in the snowstorm. There are no subtitles in the video, unfortunately, so you'll just have to try to listen in as you can to hear the words. And I will mention that this performance at the Guggenheim is performed against a backdrop with the singers in kind of nondescript black clothing, not a lot of props. This is not what our opera will look like. Our production is very busy, very colorful, many scenic elements and costume elements, and a lot going on. This is kind of like a concert performance in these examples with a little bit of choreography. So here is Santa Claus and Mrs. Claus. The singers are Kira Duffy, another local Philadelphian and Opera Philadelphia favorite, and Nicholas Newton, who entertained us as Leporello and Don Giovanni last year, singing a bit of scene 2. Feel free to write your comments as you listen in the chat.
Christmas time. Somebody kill me. The weight of this time of year is overbearing. The weight of this time of year is like a barnacle on my back, heavier than 12 inches of falling snow. Christmas time, so many children all are waiting for their presents, waiting with anticipation, waiting with the milk and cookies that will only make me fatter. Cookies only make me fatter. Fatter than all those overfed fucking reindeer. So what? Half of that shit is from an Amazon warehouse. Half of that shit is made by children without the privilege of believing in me. I'm just a fantasy. I'm just a middleman, already forgotten and replaced by AI, earlier and earlier. Children grow up and their parents say their parents say their parents say I don't exist.
Okay, I'll stop it there, although there's more to that scene. What do you all think? I find it to be a really interesting mixture of kind of caustic and hopeful, profane and innocent, aggressive and sweet. Lots of juxtapositions just within this scene. And when you see it staged, it's kind of Santa Claus and Mrs. Claus on one side of the stage, and then they're kind of looking kind of unrealistically, they're in the North Pole or wherever they live, and but they have a window into seeing 10-year-old Sue. So we see Sue kind of putting the star on the top of the Christmas tree and opening her presents and being really excited. So we see all of that acted out as this other scene is going on. Scene 3 is by a relative newcomer to opera named Andy Akiho. He's originally from South Carolina. He was a percussionist who became interested in the steel pan tradition and trained on the instrument in Trinidad for a while. He's currently nominated for 2 Grammy Awards, so we wish him lots of luck in the next couple of weeks. In this example, you will hear lots of driving rhythm. So you can hear that he's a percussionist. Percussion is and the rhythm is a really big part of this piece. As we hear 2 college students try to figure out, along with us in the audience, who is Sue. So that's something that we'll hear over and over again in this scene. Sorry, I know the words are a little hard to understand. I'll try to keep on typing some key phrases in the chat. I can't type fast enough to actually super title it for you in real time, but I'll do my best. But a lot of the words in the scene are just, who is Sue? Which is a question that we in the audience have as well throughout the opera. Who is Sue? We're just seeing these little windows into her life, but who is she? And that's what these college students are trying to find out. You'll also get to see the 2 singers navigating not only the tricky rhythmic and melodic material, but also synchronized choreography. And I'm told that in rehearsals, they were at first shocked and appalled to hear that they would be doing so much choreography in this opera, but then they got really into it and are really fantastic. So here is Kira Duffy again, as well as Nikki Spence. I'm so bad with names. Nikki Spence. And here is a little bit of scene 3.
comes from money.
I think she comes from California.
Who is
She's a blank slate. She's a blank slate. She's a blank slate. She's a blank slate. She's a blank slate.
blank slate? Blank slate. She's a blank slate. She's a blank slate. In a lot. In a lot. She's a blank slate. She's a blank slate. In a lot of ways. Who is Sue?
I'll stop it there. So a lot of the text is repeated in this scene as kind of a rhythmic ostinato. It's a lot of she's a blank slate, she's a blank slate, she's a blank slate in a lot of ways. So it's all, Sue is a mystery to us. She's a mystery to these characters. And then we'll hear a refrain later in this scene that goes, I hate her and I want to be her. I hate her and I want to be her. So this interesting mix of admiration, jealousy, contempt in these characters. And these characters never appear again. They're not main characters in the opera. They're not main characters in Sue's life, but they offer us a kind of point of connection with the audience, all of us trying to figure out who Sue is and why we care about her. Scene 4 takes place inside Sue's busy mind, so another vantage point for us. The scene has music by our current composer in residence, Natalie Joachim, a Brooklynite who serves as an assistant professor of composition at Princeton University. This is one of the scenes we unfortunately don't have an audio example for, but it consists of a newscaster reporting live from Sue's brain, mixing world news with personal details of Sue's life. Joachim has the reporter switch back and forth between personas as she essentially ventriloquizes her sources. Sue, however, speaks for herself. She doesn't sing, she speaks. So just looking at this score and the directions here, character switch, sung with a taunting nasal quality. She quotes someone saying, "Good riddance to that asshole." Back to Brenda, the newscaster, said one associate, sung through a smile. Passionately, this time as Brenda, I hope when the rocket exploded that he felt I forget the last word is, but flame or something like that. So she's giving commentary, reporting the news, giving her own commentary, and including quotations from her sources. And when she switches back and forth between these personas, it's sung differently, which makes the scene really amusing and interesting. Apparently, the newscaster is patterned after a famous Philadelphia newscaster, or maybe a few of them. The character's name is Brenda Blackwoman, representing the fact that in this decade of Sue's life, there are very few Black female reporters. And so this is kind of the epitome of a Black female reporter making her way in the world. Again, we don't see Brenda Blackwoman anywhere else in the opera. She's just in this one scene, but she gives us a window into Sue's mind. We then turn to scene 5, which is by music director of the avant-garde New York opera company Heartbeat Opera, which is famous for its creative reimaginings of canonic operatic works. Dan Schlossberg tackles Roger's aria and complications ensue. Roger is Sue's boyfriend. He is a recurring character in the opera. And long after a rough breakup with Sue, he's surprised when Sue gets back in touch with him. His aria is a rambling message that Roger leaves on Sue's answering machine. And again, this aria is genre bending. We'll hear it going back and forth between more of a expected classical music style and kind of jazzier bits where we think he's kind of gonna, pull out a top hat and a cane and start dancing. So here's a little bit of Nicholas Newton singing Roger's aria.
Hey, Susie, it's Roger. Well, obviously, you know that, but I got your message, so I'm just calling you back. It's been a long time since the last time we spoke, and honestly, I was surprised to hear from you. Are you still working in publishing? Are you and your mom still not speaking? Did you move to the Upper West Side and get out of Brooklyn? Or are you still stuck in Borum Hill? You just had a birthday, the big 4-0. And even though we haven't been together for a while, I remember. I still remember. Did you go out with friends and do something special? Did you sing happy birthday and eat ice cream cake? Or did you just stay home and watch All About Eve? You always were a loner, which drove me crazy. But I won't dwell. I hope you're well.
I'll stop it there. Spoiler alert, he does dwell. He says he won't dwell, but he does dwell. And the aria gets kind of more and more out of control as he begins to blame her for the end of their relationship. This is staged with Roger at a phone booth, and Sue kind of in the corner of the scene in her own home, kind of lounging unconcerned with a cigarette. And Roger's at a phone booth with a, brown bag of alcohol in his hand, obviously drunk, kind of falling down, and kind of messily spilling out all of his thoughts about their prior relationship. So it's funny in a certain way in terms of the switches in musical style and kind of this jazz club persona that comes out in the music. But there's also a lot of pain in Roger's story. Scene 6 is one of my favorites because the character, I'll put in quotes, singing in this scene is a computer algorithm represented by a trio of singers. Cecile McLaurin-Salvant tackles this scene with a humorously robotic vocal writing that is so repetitive that it can't help but get stuck in your head. I must admit that I've found myself on social media hearing echoes of this operatic voice of the algorithm singing, "Click on it, you know you want to," which is the words that we will hear. So Cecile McLaurin-Salvant, the jazz vocalist and pianist, expert at lots of different genres, has written lots of different kinds of music. And here she puts her skills to good use with this algorithm trio.
Click on it, you know you want to. It's been tailored to you, Sue. Click on it, you know you want to. It's been tailored to you, Sue.
And your specific female
that last line was, we're like your social security card. Although it is silly, this scene, I think, is also an effective social commentary about the pervasiveness of technology in modern life and the joint lack of privacy and community that can follow from this reliance on computer algorithms. In scene 7, we meet a new character, one that does not even feature prominently in Sue's life, her next door neighbor, who is desperately lonely and adrift in a world where everyone would rather be scrolling on their phones than having a conversation. Up and coming composer Alistair Coleman, who lived in Philadelphia as a student at Curtis and is currently earning his PhD at Princeton, sets the music in this scene. The tenor aria he creates between a lament and a diatribe is a poignant reminder that if we don't know what's going on with others in our community, it might just be because we're not listening hard enough. And Sue definitely doesn't really listen to her neighbor in this scene.
I have a secret that I've been dying to tell. But these days, I shut my trap and pretend to be asleep. I have a secret that I've been dying to tell. But it's not a secret, really. More like a feeling, or feelings that I have inside. But the thought police are everywhere, and the fines they give out are steep. So these days, I shut my trap.
So he's singing that he has a secret. It's not really a secret, it's a feeling, really, but these days, everyone is listening to everything and he just keeps his mouth shut. But this aria is the moment where he kind of opens up because he feels that Sue is trustworthy. This scene, there are a lot of silly props. There are little like kiddie pools, and the tenor will be splashing around in real water on stage. So the kind of like suburban backyard sort of scene. And we still see Sue kind of not really paying attention, scrolling on her phone, doing some embroidery, as her neighbor pours his heart out just on the other side of the fence. We don't have an example from scene 8, but it is one of the most powerful scenes in the opera, I think, because it is the only time we hear Sue herself sing in a duet with her younger self. The libretto reviews the previous scenes, all of the different incarnations of Sue. So we hear text about Sue waiting for Santa Claus and Sue going to college and Sue's relationship with Roger. So all of the plot points we've heard so far, we get a little bit of a review in the text of this scene. And the music to this scene is by Kamala Sankaram, an opera veteran whose work I hope we get to hear more of in Philadelphia in the coming years. Again, this is just a page from the score. We have the voice of Kira Duffy as the younger Sue, and the voice of Justin Vivian Bond as her 70-year-old self. And they're purposefully kind of set against each other, one high and youthful, one low. Bond describes their own voice as quote, kind of woody and full of vibration. It's a very unique sound. And we have opera and cabaret vocal stylings coming together with Bond singing into a standing microphone center stage. If you look carefully at the last stave of the score, over here, you will see that the lyrics get quite raunchy, as they often do throughout the opera. So fair warning, there's lots of sex in the text of this opera, in the props you'll see on stage, and the action you'll see on stage. Some of it is quite risque, so just giving you a fair warning. Scene 9 is by another former Opera Philadelphia composer in residence, the amazing Renee Orth, whose 10 Days in a Madhouse impressed at the Wilma Theater a few seasons ago. Set as a driving march with the repeated rhythmic pattern played by a snare drum that you can see here. Da 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 and so on. We have two octogenarians effortfully walking across the stage, singing about outrunning death. It's a comic scene, but with a grim underscoring of the inevitability of mortality. So there are some lines of comic dialogue before they start singing, but throughout this whole scene, we hear this kind of, I guess, a death march. They're saying they're running away from death, but death is going to get them. And death does indeed return in the next scene. The opera ends with a scene by Nico Muhly, who has written two operas commissioned by the Metropolitan Opera and whose Dark Sisters we performed at the Perelman Theater in 2013. The quartet of singers returns as a joint embodiment of death as Sue blows out her candle on her 99th birthday cake. Death is inviting in this scene rather than menacing, gently urging Sue to take leave of the world. The repeated refrain in this scene is "Come dance with death," and it lulls us into a peaceful state after the frantic pace of the rest of the opera. I find this scene truly beautiful and moving, especially with the staging, which you won't see in this excerpt, but we'll listen to a minute or so of the music. And it continues until the end of the scene, this kind of lilting, "Come dance with death, come dance with death." It's quite powerful, I think. Complications Ensue embodies Opera Philadelphia's tagline, I would argue, opera but different. Recognizable features of opera are out in full force, but there are also many twists. There's a solo aria for each singer, which is very common in opera, but the main character of the opera, Sue, barely sings. There are ensembles where different combinations of singers come together, but the characters they play change every scene. The opera is a creative combination of music and text, but the musical voice changes 10 times because we have 10 composers. Likewise, there are some repeated motifs in the text. Santa, the prevalence of technology, aging, but no repeated motifs in the music, since by virtue of the opera's compositional process, no musical material could be recalled across scenes. No composer knew what the other composer was writing, so they couldn't say, "Oh, I'm going to repeat this theme from scene 3 and scene 9. So we have a callback to that musically. They just couldn't do that. You will be the first audiences hearing this new piece, which is at once experimental and traditional, and I'm so curious to hear what you think. We look forward to welcoming you to performances at the Academy of Music next week, and at this time, I am happy to address any questions you may have. Yes, Susan, thank you for that question. I kept on meaning to say it during the musical examples and forgetting every time the musical example ended. Those excerpts from the Guggenheim, they couldn't bring a full opera, full orchestra to New York. So they had the wonderful, wonderful, wonderful Grant Luning on our music staff accompanying everything. He's really like a wizard. I don't know how he plays all of that in a piano reduction. In the opera itself, we will have a full orchestra, again, conducted by Karen Levine, but Grant has been preparing the singers, playing in all of the rehearsals, and the orchestra starts to be added to the rehearsal process this week. So no one's heard it with orchestra yet. That's going to be happening in the room at the end of this week. And so I will have more to say about the orchestration at that point, but I'm really interested to hear how it changes with the full orchestra. Francine asks, did the composers have the words prior to creating their music or just a general idea of what decade or scene it was? Thanks, Francine. So the composers had the words for their individual scene. So Missy Mazzoli writing scene 2 had all of the words for scene 2 written by Michael R. Jackson, and also the general idea of the scene, like your scene is Sue as a child, scene 1 is her as a baby. It goes all the way up to her at 99 years old. But she didn't see any of the specific text for scenes 1, 3, 4, 5, etc. Does that make sense? Other questions? Yeah.
Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
The music that you just played recently reminded me of another opera that we heard by Millie. Am I right?
Another opera that you heard by who?
By the same composer.
The last composer I heard, Nico Muhly.
Yes.
Yeah, composers do have some kind of consistency across their work, so it's possible that you've heard something else by him that has a similar pattern.
What do you call that type of that little thing?
I think it was kind of like an arpeggiated rhythmic motif, a repeated da 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 da, right? A repeated rhythm, but also there were skips between the notes. It wasn't notes next to each other being played. It's kind of skipping between notes.
It's very effective. I really enjoyed it.
Yes, I do too. Thank you. Other questions? Well, I'm serious about wanting to hear reactions from you because you are the first audiences from this piece. So I'm going to just pop my, it is also reminiscent of Philip Glass. You're absolutely right. There are some minimalist influences in Nico Muhly and some of these other composers. I'm just typing my email address in the chat here. If you want to write to me after the opera with any reactions that you have, I'd be very happy to hear them as I continue my study of this piece, because we don't have anything written about this piece yet because it was just composed. And also, if you have any questions before you go to the opera that you think of, please feel free to write to me. The recording of this Between the Notes should be available to review later this week, I would think, Adele. Is that right? And also the recording of the full Guggenheim works in progress and process that I took those musical examples from. So with the panel and the full musical examples is available on YouTube. I'm think the link got sent out in an Opera Philadelphia email yesterday, but I'm sure Adele can send it out again when she sends out this recording.
Yes, absolutely. We can include that whenever we send out this. Well, unless anyone else has any questions right now, Lily, thank you so much for that very complicated or very amazing summary of a very complicated piece. We are very grateful for you. And thank you to everyone for participating today and for all that you do to support Opera Philadelphia. We cannot wait to see you at the opera next week. Everyone take care and stay warm.